You're tuned to 1520 WCHE Radio, and it's time now for the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will offer reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today. And now, Sam Hankin.
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Avid Reader, brought to you by Wellington Square Bookshop. My bookshop, so it's the best bookshop in the world. Today we're lucky to have with us Maggie Shipstead, author of, just published by Knopf and released last month in hardback, Astonish Me. Maggie is also the author of Seating Arrangements, her first novel, and a great novel, and a bestseller, and the winner of the Dylan Thomas Prize. She graduated from Harvard. Her writing has appeared in so many things, but also in the New York Times, and was in the Best American Short Story anthology, one of my favorite anthologies. Welcome, Maggie. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So should I ask the first question that everybody asks you, or do you know what the first question is everybody asks you?
Are you going to ask if I'm a dancer?
Yes.
No, I'm not.
Go with that and just do your usual response.
I'm not. I love ballet. I really was writing in some ways just from the point of view of a fan. I took, like many girls, a year of ballet when I was 5, and my mom is a lifelong, very serious fan and had studied a little bit more than that. Like, even she danced in her early 20s. So she started taking me to the ballet when I was about 5, and we'd go 4 times a year. I grew up in Southern California, and we were lucky to have great companies tour through. So I've seen most sort of prominent ballet companies over the years. So yeah, 4 times a year, probably until I was 18, and since then I've gone whenever I can. So I'd seen a lot of ballet, but of course the book took some research.
Yeah, a lot of research. What I was interested in was that you came up with the story, and it kind of apparently just meandered along for years until you came up with Arslan. And tell me how that came about.
So the novel started as a short story I wrote when I was in a workshop at Stanford, and the story covered about 20 years. It was mostly about Joan, who's still the central character of Astonish Me, but about her mostly after she'd stopped dancing and she moves to California and has a family, and her son in the story does not become a dancer. And so I was working on a different novel and then kind of decided to take a break and revise the story. And as soon as I did that, it just started to grow and grow. And so pretty early I came up with the idea of including a defector, partly because I just think that aspect of dance in the 70s was so fascinating and created sort of energy and attention around dance that might never happen again, because it was such a national compliment that dancers like Nureyev or Baryshnikov defected. And so once I sort of had that character, it really started to take shape, and it grew with every draft.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the reviews say you modeled Arslan specifically from Baryshnikov, but it doesn't seem like you actually did. It was more of a compilation of characters, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably more closely modeled on Baryshnikov than anyone else, but I purposely didn't learn too much about Baryshnikov's biography. I already knew something, and I knew about the way in which he defected, which I borrowed, partly just because I knew it worked. But ethnically, Arslan is a Tatar, like Nureyev. And I also I didn't want him to be a stand-in for any one particular person. I sort of wanted him to be about the idea of someone like Baryshnikov.
I was just in New York this weekend, and I had interviewed Cheryl Tippins, who had written Memoirs of a Dream Palace about the Chelsea Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
Where I stayed 44 years ago. And I went in, and there's this old lady just sitting there, and it turns out it's Merrill Lister, who's the former director of her own dance company.
Oh,
and
wow.
She was telling me all these stories about her friendship with Nureyev and Baryshnikov. And she's one of the 50 residents that still live in the Chelsea Hotel, even though it's basically not really, it's not a hotel, it's just being renovated. But she's lived there since 1981. She was fascinating.
Oh, wow, I bet.
So the cover, you joked in a lot of your, when you talked in a lot of the interviews about, you were afraid that the cover would be a woman in a bathing suit and immediately labeled chick lit. And it's so funny because owning an independent bookstore, everyone says you can't judge a book by its cover, but everybody does.
Yeah.
I mean, our front table, people pick up the books at the cover. So what happens is, instead of the woman in the bathing suit, you have ballet ribbons.
Mm-hmm.
So did you like that? Did you fight that? Did you want something less feminine?
Well, the woman in the bathing suit was actually for seating arrangements, and
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, but we had a big struggle with that, and I was getting sort of a series of designs there was a woman in a white one-piece bathing suit sitting on the beach. I got the back of a girl's head on the beach, and I just sort of thought, this is a book mostly about a 59-year-old man, and I think people know when they're sort of being tricked. I think if you bought that book thinking, I want to read a book about this woman, and then instead you read a book about this sort of disgruntled father of the bride, I don't think people would really love that. So I sent this crazy manifesto to my publisher, and to their great credit, they really listened to me, and we kind of went back to the drawing board. But then the process was repeated a little bit with Astonish Me, and I did see a lot of designs featuring the back of a woman's head, or designs that were just, of legs wearing point shoes and that sort of thing. And I think ballet, just as a concept, is very off-putting to some people. So I didn't want something that was so explicitly about ballet that anyone who's not, inherently already into ballet would say, oh, that's not for me. So we had sort of a cover that was black and had kind of graffiti lettering that we were going with, and Barnes & Noble didn't like it. So we changed to this, which I actually like quite a lot. And I like how aesthetically it actually relates to the seating arrangements hardback, so it's kind of nice to have that association.
Yeah, it's funny. What I find is that women will buy books with covers that are somewhat, I don't know, masculine. They're not really masculine,
Sure.
but men, stay away from books that they think if they're reading it on an airplane, someone might
Right.
think twice about it.
Right. Well, and of course women buy more books, so it does make sense to market to women, but I've always been a little reluctant to completely alienate 50% of the people in this world with.
I know, and the funny thing is I have all these book clubs at my bookstore. We have our own and lots of others. I've yet to see one man in any of those book clubs. Not one.
Yeah, no, it's so unusual. Although for seating arrangements, I went to an all-male book club.
Really?
Yeah. It was, my friend's dad was in it, and it's in Chappaqua, New York, and they meet monthly, and it's the whole 9 yards. It was really fun. It was so different.
Maybe I'll try to do that. We have a young adult one now. I don't see why we can't. Yeah, I should try that.
Mm-hmm.
Except then I'd have to go.
Yeah, that's right.
So the other thing that's interesting about the mechanics of the book is it has a note on the typeface, which is Bell, which I really like that typeface. Did you have anything to do with that, or was that just them deciding? Or
No, that's just them. And then, yeah, the sort of nerdy note at the end. I think
know.
Seating Arrangements had one as well. But yeah, I like how it looks. So.
Yeah, it's very readable.
Mm-hmm.
So when you, as you say, dip in and out of a story. Oh yeah, that's the thing. Okay, so the table of contents is one of those table of contents that sometimes puts people off, which is 19 whatever, and then in New York, and then in Disney World, and then here, and then there. Some people are going, oh no, I won't be able to do it. But the thing that was really cool was that everything flowed so nicely, and the reader didn't have to say, oh, I got to turn the page and it's going to be about someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if, you could actually see where it was going and why it was going there. But did you worry a little bit about, as you say, dipping in and out of the story? Do you worry about the reader then? Did you think about that?
Well, when I was writing it, it really came out that way organically. So I didn't really plan it from the beginning. As I drafted, I would write, and it's in present tense, as you know, and so I'd write through sort of action in whatever year I was in and get to a place where I felt information was missing, and that's what triggered the jumps back in time. And as I initially wrote it, it was a much shorter book. My first draft was only 90 pages. It was really, barely a novella even. And it was even choppier. And this was probably the biggest thing that my editor at Knopf and I did after I sold it, was we combined some sections so the reader could stay in one place in time a little bit longer, and aligned sections in chronological order more than they were. And the way I had initially done it made perfect sense to me. It had this sort of internal logic, but I think it would have been a lot to keep track of. You would have had to pay really close attention to what happened in what year. So I guess I almost feel like this version is the kind of reader-friendly version as opposed to what it was originally.
And it's funny, too, because the title, Astonish Me, in many books, the title kind of telegraphs the novel.
Mm-hmm.
And in this book, it doesn't at all, without saying anything else. It's a great title, but it's contextually not confusing, because that's a bad word.
Mm-hmm.
It's intriguing to the reader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny, I think almost in every review the book has gotten, the reviewer has weighed in on whether or not the book astonished them, and it's like, well, you are not the me in
right.
the title. It's not about you. But yeah, I had the title fairly early. It's as the book explains, it's what Diaghilev used to say to the ballet Russe, and I like this sort of historical ballet context, and I think I also meant it just in the sense of even people you know really well, like the people you know best in the world, can still surprise you, and also just I think the possibilities that live performance has. Like, that's part of what I love about the ballet, is those moments when you just sort of gasp in amazement.
Well, there's certain gasping in this book that also that also lead to the reader's understanding of the title.
Yes.
God, I have to be very careful, don't I?
I know. Well, it's funny. I mean, I know what you're being careful about, but it gets characterized as a twist. There's a plot point we're sort of talking around, but as I wrote, I never really envisioned it as kind of a twist or a surprise. So it's been really kind of educational to see how people read the book.
There's two twists. But I can't talk about the other twist. Maybe
it's very secret.
It's secret, yes. Well, that's funny, because you are making you even said in one of the interviews, when you're done, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you write too, So when you're done, and I ask this to a lot of authors, whose book is it then? Is it my book now, and it's my work that I have to do? Do you feel like you're sending your child off to college and you only see him at Christmas and Thanksgiving? Or
well, this book, as I wrote it, I mean, I think because it took me a long time to sort of admit to myself that I was writing, that this was going to be a novel and an actual book. I was really writing for my own pleasure, and so I kind of was my own reader through the whole process, and I let happen in the book what I wanted to have happen, and I wrote it in a way mimicking the tone of classical ballet, so it has sort of a swoop to it and a little bit of melodrama. But then I think also partly because it was such an accidental creation in a way, its seating arrangements when it was published felt a little bit more personal, and this feels, even though seating arrangements wasn't about my life either, this feels a little bit more just like a frisbee that I've sort of like thrown out there, and it's off on its own sort of path now.
Yeah. Well, I play ultimate frisbee, so I know exactly what you mean. I love frisbee. It's funny too, because when you talk about life experiences with regard to the book, have you ever felt as Joan did about anyone in your life in that particular scene in the dressing room? Have you ever felt that way about anybody?
Oh, I don't think so, but I don't think I've ever met, I mean, so much of Joan's attraction to Arslan is that he represents the talent she wished she had for herself. So I feel like their meeting was very specific. It would have to be meeting someone who's sort of a hero to you, who's also just an unbelievably charismatic person. Part of what I tried to do in the book was take charisma kind of seriously as a force. So I don't think I've met anyone who's that magnetic. I don't think there are that many people.
Would you like to?
Sure. It'd be an adventure.
But I mean, she pretty much throws herself into it completely.
I mean, maybe I should think twice about it, because it's not like it really works out well for her. But.
Well, that was her choice, and I mean, she made her own bed, so to speak.
Yeah, she sure did, with a lot of determination.
Yeah, a determination that That's the other thing about the readers, like the determination. Was it totally thought out? Was it somehow, almost like somebody telling her something outside the book telling her, because the reader doesn't know for sure for a while. But she did. She had her life kind of planned out. Unlike, well, Elaine did too, to a certain extent, didn't she? When she was 31 years old and she gets up and, she's had her sprains and knee surgery and all that, and she's involved with Mr. K. She knows where she is, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And in Elaine's case, I think it's all kind of going according to plan, even despite the fact that her relationship with Mr. K is so unorthodox.
I like the way that in that paragraph, in that passage where she's talking about how, and then she puts on the shorts and folds them down because her muscles are still tight from the flight and all that. I like the way she says something about, every once in a while in a turn or a pirouette, she has that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what that's like, and I think a lot of readers would know what that's like.
Yeah. And that sort of idea is one of the driving forces for me behind the book. I mean, I think I'm really interested in the practices of other artists and how they encounter their limitations and how they experience their own talents. And so I think inevitably writing about dance, in a way, is writing about writing, too, and just those moments where everything works and it's pleasurable, and then other moments where it seems utterly impossible and pointless, and just sort of how these dancers kind of make their peace with that.
And you also say something about, like unreality is something that helps us shape the idea of reality in our own head, which I think is very true. So, the one review likens you to a modern-day Edith Wharton. What did you think of that one?
I mean, that's pretty flattering. I like Wharton a lot.
I like her too, but I was thinking, no, there's no way. And then I thought of Ethan Frome, which I hated. But the thing about Ethan Frome that your book mirrors is that there's this idea of freedom that you think you have,
Uh-huh.
You think, well, I could just get up and move. I could just get up and take her with me and forget about my sister and, go off on my own. I don't have to get into a sled and try to kill myself and my lover. But then there's things tie you up.
Uh-huh.
And they don't necessarily have to tie you up. You just decide that they're going to. You put your own albatrosses around your neck.
Yeah, it's true. And I think in Astonish Me, Joan, when she leaves ballet, she almost kind of has a sense inside her own head that she's sort of throwing her life away and that it's all over now for her. And I think kind of one of the big surprises of her life is that she does find satisfaction in teaching, and she does find more in her marriage than she thought she would. And she kind of, she's fortunate in a way that, of course, dancers' careers are so short, and so she's young enough when she thinks she's throwing everything away that she still has time to sort of recover.
Look, it happens to football players, too.
Sure.
They play 10 years, and they're in worse shape than ballet. They can't even move backwards. They can't do stuff with their kids. It's
Not
horrible.
to mention the brain trauma,
concussions. And the thing about, like, if you go through the characters, Jacob is such a nice guy. And, he is kind of a nerd, but he's such a nice guy, and he kind of, like, Well, that's another thing at the end, shoot, sorry. I'm being pretty good, though, right?
No, you're being very sort of coded about some of it.
I'm hoping the readers like the idea of this because you're supposed to be here selling books. But Jacob, he's kind of nerdy and all that, but he does astonish you in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And what I liked too in that same passage again when Elaine, they're talking about Mr. K and how he took this woman home and didn't do anything with her. And Elaine I love because she can't believe that someone in the Corps is even talking to her. and then she says, because the girl says, well, he's not, she says he's never going to, don't worry about it, he's not going to take you. She goes, yeah, especially since I'm not a boy. And then Elaine says, yeah, or talented.
Yeah, Elaine's tough. She's
Yeah.
a tough cookie.
And I like the way she rose up and said it, Yeah, she says some great things. And she's a great foil for Joan. And the other one who's a great foil for Joan in a different way is Sandy.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of knew I wanted to write about Southern California, and so I grew up in basically where they are in the 80s, and so it was sort of fun for me to try and reconstruct that time and that place. I think it was such a, Reagan era kind of optimism and new stuff, and the whole sequence at Disneyland, and the fact that there's all this money going into gifted education and all these things. And what actually fueled the short story that I wrote, it was more about the way that parents of very young children get, in my opinion, very strangely competitive about their children's futures, like not just about how their children are developmentally as 4-year-olds, but what those children will be like when they're, 30 or 40, whatever. And so it started out being really more about sort of competition between parents and about parents sort of wanting so badly to see certain things in their children and competing with each other sort of through these illusions.
Yeah, and with Sandy, it's like it's like Schadenfreude. She wants to revel in the failures of Joan, but she can't really find any because they're all in her. Mm-hmm. And she's waiting for something, because Chloe's so outspoken, and what she really means is Chloe's a brat, and whereas Joan's son is, a nice, very nice person who's quiet, and so she can't understand why he's picked as gifted. It's funny. I was listening to this. Jerry Seinfeld has this show on the internet called Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
Oh yeah,
which is hilarious. But he had Louis C.K. on. And Louis C.K. they were talking about putting kids to bed. They were saying, you got to read, and then you got to soothe them, and you got to talk to them, and do little rituals, and then you go back in, and then you close the door, whatever. And Jerry and Louis are saying, the way it should work is you just go upstairs, put them in bed, and you say, go to sleep, close the door. That's it. Good night.
I agree. I mean, I don't have children, but that's how I imagine doing it.
This is how my dad did it. It worked, get to bed, and that was it. And if you came back in, of course, what was I doing? Same thing you were probably doing, under the covers with a flashlight at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And then what was cool about my dad was he'd come in and he'd scream at me, but you could tell he was kind of proud of me for doing it, So it was like two things at once, so...
Yeah, I was totally the kid who got in trouble in elementary school for hiding under tables and reading. And I think, my mom was sort of the same way. She was sort of like, okay, well, try not to do that. But you could tell she liked it, of all the things to get in trouble for.
I know, and the thing about it is, it's really, and well, heck, I own a bookstore, for God's sakes. Really, it really is the best thing you can do. I mean, it's like a time machine. It's like holding someone's soul in your hand. There's so many things about it that are right. I mean, and if the whole point of life is to acquire as much information as you can during the short time you're here, I mean, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, we are sort of, quarantined inside one body and one mind and one experience, but I feel like reading is the way to experience other people's experiences, and I think it just vastly expands your life. I mean, of course, I would think that, being a purveyor of fiction. But
right, we're both, it's like preaching to the choir for both of us.
Yeah.
And that's why J.K. Rowling is my heroine. Even if Harry Potter series wasn't good, but it was good, even if it wasn't, what she did was millions and millions of kids read because of her.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was saying that exact same thing to someone last night at dinner, and you have this whole generation of kids who read a 600-page book when they're 12 years old and loved it. And, just the expansion of the YA market, I think, can only be a good thing. It's not like anyone reads a book and goes, that was a great book, so great, I'm never reading any more books. It just, creates an appetite for it.
Yeah, and it's funny because, again, owning a bookstore, if you have the Harry Potter book and you can't sell it till 12:01, and then you have these kids outside, and they don't even leave the bookstore. They just sit down. They just sit down and start, and they don't stop until they're done. I mean, there's something so wonderful about that.
Yeah, I love that series. I think I was 23 when the last one came out. I was spending the summer in New York, and I went with two friends, as soon as we could get it, and we all when laid down in Central Park right outside the bookstore and got to work.
That's so funny. What was the first book you ever read? What book started you? What book did you like so much you had her?
You know, I don't know. My mom read to me, and picture books and that sort of thing. And when we did family road trips, she would read aloud to the whole family. So I think the first novel I read myself was Ramona Quimby. I was a pretty early reader, so I was probably kind of in the 5 or 6 range when I read that. But after that, I mean, I think I really missed the way that I read as a child, actually. I was so indiscriminate and would just read anything and wasn't, you know, critical and liked things more than others, but would just happily pick up anything. And, you know, now it's a little different. It's some books are so good that they're depressing, and other books that aren't good just sort of annoy me. I can't read them. So it's difficult to sort of find something that absorbs me in the same way. I really miss that.
Well, it's so funny because, like, when I was 15 or 16, like, I was reading Nikolai Gogol and Crime and Punishment and Anna Karenina, and I'm thinking, what the heck? Because now I think back on it, I think I just got a lot dumber. Because when I read like, or Ayn Rand, you know, Ayn Rand, not that I believe in her philosophy, but at the time I just went through everything. Yeah. I still remember all the names, you know, John Galt and Peter Fallow and Ellsworth Toohey and all those people. And I read them all, and it was like, I understood them all. And I'm wondering, could I do that today?
I think it's just it's this openness or something, and also just an ability to concentrate that I think is sort of difficult to maintain as an adult. I have a few friends who are really esoteric readers and just read everything, and I really envy them.
Yeah, later this week I'm going to be interviewing Rivka Galchen, who wrote Atmospheric Disturbances and has a new collection out now. And she's like that. She can interview anybody, and she can talk to anybody, and she's a doctor, and she's at Columbia and all that. And it's like she can just attack anything like that, and it's just such a wonderful talent. Yeah. And I was interviewing Karen Russell, who wrote Swamplandia and all those other books, and she was saying, you can't even hate her, you know? You want to hate her because she's so smart and all that. But she's such a nice person, you can't really hate her.
Yeah.
The other guy in the book that, you know, he kind of gets short shrift, but not really, is poor Gary, you know?
Yeah.
I felt so sorry for him. I mean, he wasn't really a bad guy, but, you know, everything just worked out wrong for him.
Yeah. I think Gary kind of spent his whole abbreviated life sort of laboring under a series of misconceptions, which, of course, happens.
Yeah, he did. Things didn't work out no matter what happened.
But he's definitely a sad sack, and I also kind of made him, I didn't want him to be a particularly nice sad sack. He is a bit of a jerk on top of it.
Yeah, he's a jerk, and he might like Joan, but he doesn't like her for the right reasons.
Right.
And not only does he not like her for the right reasons, he uses her as a tool to attack his wife, which is, yeah, he's pretty bad.
Yeah, he's not great.
And then you also have like little bad people like Ludmilla, you know. She just pops in and that, and then she's like the deus machina, you know, at the end. You know, it's like, you know, she's utilized for a particular purpose.
Yeah, and that was kind of a surprise to me.
How the heck did you think of that?
No, I mean, I'd had her in the book all along, and then I got to that section of the book where I needed someone to do some notifying of the other characters, and it was like she had been there all along for that reason. But I don't outline or anything, so it was kind of, it just happened to work out, which is becoming a dangerous kind of relationship with my own process, because I just sort of embark on things and trust that I'll sort of figure it out. Or
well, no, that worked really good, because, you know, in the first scene when Joan is petting her dogs, which she can't do, and everybody says she can't do it, and Joan's doing it for a specific reason. So it, again, I keep doing these puns. It bookends the book, which it really does bookend the book. You know, here's the first scene, and there's like almost the last scene, and she hasn't changed. You know?
Yeah.
And then and then there's this whole undercurrent of this gay theme that goes through the entire book, and it kind of, there's not an ambivalence about it, but there's, you know, this idea that ballet means that if you're a boy doing ballet, then you have to be gay or something like that. And you dispel that, and I think you dispel it in a disarming, honest, and very clear way, so I think it does educate the reader.
Good. Yeah. As I was going, I just happened to not have central characters who are gay. Like Harry's a dancer, he's not gay. Arslan's dancer, he's not gay. But there, of course, are many gay dancers. So I sort of wanted to acknowledge the fact that, that's a thing. But it just, these characters just happen not to be really bound up in it, with the exception of Mr. K, I guess.
Well, no. Mr. K is also not bound up in it because he has this strange lifestyle. And again, it's tied to this, it's tied to, oh yeah, what is that? What is the term that when you make, what's the term, make an opera? What, is that a term of art?
Oh, like make a ballet.
Yeah, make a ballet. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they say it, which I didn't really realize until I started researching the book. And I like it. I mean, it seems like it incorporates the idea of a muse just into the technical language almost.
Yeah, at first I thought, well, is that a typo? And then I realized, I looked it up, I realized that's what you say.
Yeah.
And Mr. K also has a way of using another sense, the sense of smell, by giving each of these people he makes a ballet for a different type of scent. He's a strange guy.
He is a little bit strange, yeah. And then clearly he's inspired a bit by Balanchine, but Balanchine's another one I didn't learn too much about. And as far as I'm aware, Balanchine was not bisexual, and he married a series of women. But he did seem to have just this intense sort of, I don't know if it was so much that he loved individual women as much as he loved their sort of potential to be vessels for his creation, which there is something, to my mind, that's just a tiny bit creepy about that.
Well, what about when he says, or when Elaine intuits that although she's his idea of a woman, she's not his ideal of a woman.
Right, which is why even with his sort of, he can never really be monogamous in any sense. And it's just sort of this, I feel like Saint Philander isn't even the right word. He just sort of, he's like a bee pollinating things or something.
Right, and that's why Elaine, I think, really appreciates him and loves him. I mean, it's one that, you have characters that can't help, go back to this. They can't help what they do.
Yeah.
And the same thing's true of your first novel.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, self-control is a bit of an issue for my character.
Apparently so. Perhaps some therapy. So when you, like, for this book, because it is somewhat cinematic, do you think, or could it be a movie? And if it was, do you have, in your mind, do you think about who would play this, who would play Joan, who would do, that kind of thing?
I try not to get invested in the idea of my books being made into movies. My first book was optioned, and then that kind of expired, and so it ended up being a good form of self-preservation, and I never really take it that seriously. But with this book, I think it could be a really cool movie. I think it would potentially be an impossible movie to make, just because it's so difficult to find people who can both dance and act, let alone over, the 30 years that the book covers.
Right. It would be good, though. It's like that. I love the book Winter's Tale by Mark Halperin, and they made it into this movie, and it sucked. And everybody said it sucked, and it must have lasted like 2 weeks. But I think Scorsese had optioned it first, and then he goes, you know what? This book is totally unfilmable.
Yeah. Yeah, and, sometimes, like, The English Patient, I think, is a book that everyone said was unfilmable, and then actually is a very beautiful movie. So I guess anything is possible in the right hands. But this, I don't know, I've seen probably most ballet movies that exist, and it's pretty tricky. I don't have a lot of faith that this would be doable.
I love watching Seinfeld bloopers,
Uh-huh.
And last night I was watching the one where she's watching The English Patient. And what's the guy who owns the catalog company?
J. Peterman.
Yeah, J. Peterman turns to her, don't you like the movie, Elaine? She goes, I hate it! And then everyone boos her, and she goes, shut up!
Yeah.
Die already!
I remember that one. Although I do love The English Patient, so.
Yeah, I did too, but I can understand.
Totally, yeah, no.
So you're working on some more short stories, and you're working on a third novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's it going to be about? If you want to tell, you don't have to.
No, I've been sort of talking about it, which I guess really commits me to what I'm doing. I'm writing about, it's kind of an even bigger scope. It starts in 1914, and the first section is about the kind of childhood and young adulthood of a woman who becomes a pilot, like a WASP pilot during World War II. These women who would be test pilots or transport planes, that sort of thing. And then after the war, she attempts to fly around the Earth north-south with stops. And I'm not totally sure it would have been possible in that era. No one did it until the 60s. So there's a lot of sort of logistical stuff to work out, especially the Antarctica phase of it. And then there's also a contemporary story about an actress playing that pilot who's lost on her flight in a biopic.
So did she have a co-pilot like Amelia Earhart did, or just she did it on her own?
She would definitely have to have at least a navigator, and I haven't decided yet about the co-pilot issue.
Is she gonna fall in love with the navigator?
I don't know.
That would be pretty hard to do.
I told you I don't outline.
I always want to go to Antarctica. You should go now.
I actually just applied to the National Science Foundation Artists and Writers program there. So if the National Science Foundation is listening, please accept my application.
Oh, although they did announce a study today that it's not going to be there much longer, so you might as well go.
Yeah.
But well, that sounds actually fascinating. And then you're working on short stories as well at the same time.
Yeah, I just have a handful that I'm trying to finish, but I think not being in workshop and anymore makes it pretty difficult for me for some reason. So
why do you think that is? Oh yeah, and you talk about the Iowa Writers Workshop and talk about how valuable that was to you too, right?
Yeah.
Was it valuable to you? Sorry.
Oh no.
Because of the discipline, or because it just expand? You know, you were talking about whether you should get an MFA or not. And,
right.
And it's like you said, what's the downside? I always say that kind of stuff too. There is no downside.
Yeah. I wasn't very disciplined when I was there. It's one of those things where if I could go back and do it over again, I think I would have written more. But it's really when I started to take writing seriously. It didn't seem like a viable career before I got there. And it did really accelerate my learning curve. I think just having good teachers, being around other people who write, reading a lot of sort of imperfect fiction that people are writing. It's funny in the whole MFA, whether or not an MFA is worthwhile conversation. There's kind of, as someone with an MFA, the first thing you have to do is defend your program against turning out cookie-cutter writers, and that was just not my experience at all. We had all kinds of people doing weird stuff, and if anything, I think the people who read the applications are just looking for anything that's different.
The strangest thing about the Iowa program is that it's in Iowa.
Yeah, that's true. It's very cold. All my memories of it are of it being dark and cold and maybe being pretty drunk.
Yeah, well, that's 1 out of 3.
Yeah.
Well, so it doesn't say in your jacket where you live. Where do you live?
I don't really live anywhere at the moment. I had a fellowship at Stanford until 2.5 years ago, and so my furniture is still in storage near Palo Alto. And right now, most of my clothes and my dog are at my parents' house in San Diego. And for the past 2.5 years, I've spent some time in San Diego, but I think probably for about half of it, I've been on the road, and I'll go places by myself for a month or a few months. I've traveled abroad probably for 8 or 9 months. I spent this past February and March in Montana, so I've just sort of had the opportunity to try different places, and I seem to do a lot of my work, or I'm most efficient when I'm sort of somewhere alone where I don't know anyone, so I tend to seek that out.
That's wonderful. You should never take that for granted, that you can do that.
It's been it's an incredible privilege. At the same time, it is a slightly weird way to live, so I might be getting to the point where I really would like to have a place to live and unpack my stuff and be able to see someone I know.
And have someone like Arslan. Well, actually, that wouldn't be the greatest thing either.
Yeah, I would take it down like 2 notches and then sure.
Don't leave your stuff in storage too long. You'll find out that you'll end up leaving it for the rest of your life.
I know, yeah, and I there are a couple of things I think about wanting, and then sort of the bulk of what's there, I don't even know what it is anymore.
Best thing to do is not get any stuff.
Yeah,
Don't have any stuff. Stuff is like another albatross around your neck.
Yeah, moving is just the worst. Every time I move, there's always
sucks.
this stuff that I've brought with me on my past 3 moves, and it almost gets harder to throw it away, even if it's useless, because you're like, well, I've moved this 3 times, so I have to keep it.
When I got divorced, my first divorce, I just walked out, so I had nothing. Everything stayed there. The only thing I had was a Pink Floyd banner, a director's chair, and an army cot. And I think I've said this before.
The bare essentials.
And I had to go out and buy a pillow. And I never felt so light in my life. It was like the unbearable lightness of being. It was just, I felt so like I was floating. And then what happened, I just started getting more stuff. And now I got a lot of stuff again.
Yeah, creeps up on you.
My cousin, she found this really nice clawfoot bathtub. And she didn't have any place to put it, so she put it in storage like when she's 21. And now she's like 68. It's still in storage.
Yeah, I was one time when I was at my parents' house recently, and my dad came home from something with some like tin box, and he was sort of like, "This is a neat box. Do you want it?" And I said no, and my mom was like, looked at me and she goes, "I'll put it in the garage, and you can deal with it when we die." I sort of said, "Thanks." That's grim.
Yeah, I know. I collect boxes too. The thing about it is that my kids aren't going to want anything that I have. Nothing I have interests them in the slightest.
Well, that could change.
Could. Yes, depending on how Machiavellian they become, I think. And hopefully we'll talk again when your new novel comes out.
All right. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Maggie Shipstead, Astonish Me. Great book. Lots of twists and turns, none of which I could talk about. What was I going to tell you? I'm going to tell you something that I know that if you listen to the show, I go say the same things over and over on a lot of my stories, like that one about my father coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning, catching me reading, those kinds of things. But I'm sorry about that, but they just seem to come up and they seem to work. Anyway, so next week, Avid Reader will welcome Julia Fierro. Her first novel is, and it's been highly anticipated, it's called Cutting Teeth. It seems on the surface like it's just about parents and taking care of kids, but it's set at this beach house over the course of actually just 1 week. And more expansively, it addresses, the deep issues: identity, romantic and family love, sex, class tensions, all the big issues. But the cool thing about it is that at first you really don't realize it's drilling down to those. So it's a character-driven, page-turning novel that really, kind of crackles with life. In short, one of the most highly anticipated new novels of the year. So as usual, and as I thanked Rebecca last week for getting these people, we get all these great, great authors, and I love looking at the indie top 10 and seeing that we've interviewed 5 or 6 of them. So in any event, thank you so much for listening today. I really liked talking to Maggie. And join us next week when we'll be talking to Julia Fierro.
You've been listening to the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will be back next week with reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today.